Hello. Welcome to where I discuss my worst and most disappointing reads of 2019. This is going to be the first video that you'll be seeing from my best books of 2019, worst books, what I plan to read in the new year, all that kind of stuff. So I'm really excited to start it off. Not exactly with my worst and most disappointing books of the year, but I figured we'd start off bad note, move on to good note, and then move on to the future, if that makes any sense. So luckily I only have around like 5 really books to share with you guys, and I'm going to start off with most disappointing and then move on to worst, because I do view them differently, and I know most people made separate videos, but I did not read enough bad books this year to make separate videos, which is good, but I just wanted to make that clear. Start off with most disappointing. Okay, so really there's only one book that I would count as disappointing, and the rest of them I would kind of start edging into like, I don't think you should waste your time with this book. But this one I definitely think is worth reading, and in fact in my favorites video you'll see a whole, it's gonna be a time. But anyway, in January of this year I read The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. This is one of my most anticipated books to read, period, because of its fae folklore. After reading A Court of Thorns and Roses and absolutely adoring that series, I felt like I was going to love every single fae book ever. And so when I read this, I had super high expectations. So when I ended up giving it a 3 stars, it was quite a shock to me and everyone else probably as well. I have very mixed feelings. I want to reread this, especially because, spoiler alert, the next 2 books in the series are some of my favorite books that I read this year, period. But so I want to reread this, but I think when I was reading it, my expectations were up here and it just wasn't anything like what I was expecting. And I think what I've learned from this is that this and its continuous books is what fae stories are, and A Court of Thorns and Roses is something very different from traditional fae stories. And I don't know, I just didn't like it. I think it felt really slow and it wasn't what I was looking for. And when I read it, I think I mentioned this when I originally read it, I'll link up when I talked about it, I think it was my spring or winter wrap up. I mentioned that I thought it was just slow, and it just, like, everyone kept talking and hyping up this relationship, and it literally did not happen at all in this book. Like, we got nothing. So I just want to let everyone know, if they're going into this book expecting some romance like I was, like A Court of Thorns and Roses, it's not there, but it's still really good if you take that out of your mind. But I didn't, so then I read it and I didn't like it, and whatever. It's probably still a good book. I gave it 3 stars. It was disappointing, but I bet you if I read it again now, it'd probably be 5. Anyway, I've talked way too long about this. I read this, it was 3 stars. It was disappointing at the time, but it redeemed itself. So really, these next couple books that I'm going to show you are disappointing, but I would not recommend you read them, because I really felt like my time was sucked from me reading this, and I don't even know why I did it. So I started the Red Queen series in 2017, I believe, maybe early 2018, and I liked it enough. I think I gave the first book a 3.5 stars, and I thought it was enjoyable. I was interested in the world, so I decided I was going to continue and finish off the series this year, because I really wanted to finish a lot of my backlist series this year, and I did do that. That'll be in a different video in the future. But this series was so not worth it. It was so not worth it. So I read Glass Sword, which I'm pretty sure I talked about this in a different video as well. I will link that up above. And so I read Glass Sword. I gave it 3 stars. I found it significantly more boring than the first book, which should have been a red flag in itself. I was like, oh, I don't like this. I shouldn't keep reading. But I was very invested in one of the characters. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to keep reading. So then, like the smart person I am, I decided I was going to read King's Cage, which is the 3rd book in the series. This is where you really started to lose me, okay? It was long, and it was not what I was looking for. And I finished this whole book expecting more from this one character, and I didn't get it here. So I started to read whatever the hell the last book is. What is it called? Warstorm. I started to read Warstorm, and I DNF'd it because I was like, I don't think I can do this. I'm just gonna look up spoilers. And then I looked up the spoilers, and the only character I cared about died. So I was like, no, I completely waste my time, and I would recommend you don't, because it was just not worth it. It was not worth it. Another book I read this because, why did I read this? Oh, it was on audiobook. And I was like, oh, I have this book, like, let me give it a try. And I read Replica by Lauren Oliver. I've had this on my shelf for a couple years now, and I like Lauren Oliver. I've read Before I Fall, and that was one of my favorite books. I read Panic and was okay. And so I wanted to give this a try because it's a little different. I've seen mixed things about it. If you don't know what this is about, because I hope you guys know what the other books are about. This is about this girl who, it's told from two perspectives. So there's Lyra and there's Gemma, and the whole idea is that there's these duplicate replica people living on this island, and something bad happens, and it's kind of just the story of that. I don't really want to give too much away of it if you still plan on reading this, but basically my biggest problem was that with this was the way it was written. I think I would have liked this story a lot more if it was written in a different way. Currently you either alternate chapters between Lyra and Gemma, or you read all of one and then you get the other. For me, I listened to the audiobook and they automatically read Lyra's part first, and then they went to Gemma's part, and I ultimately didn't like that. And I read reviews later on telling you like a different way to read it that would have made it better, but the thing is, like, all of the mystery is sucked right out of this from the first chapter of Lyra's perspective. You figure out all the mystery that is in Gemma's perspective, so I was just kind of confused on what the point was, and at the end I didn't really care much about the characters, but I ended up giving this a 2.5 stars because I felt like there was no plot twist. There was really nothing I was gaining from reading this book, and it was all very predictable. So I didn't enjoy it that much. I don't think it was worth it, and I won't be continuing this series. This year I read the entire The Fifth Wave series, and I loved the first book. It was one of my favorite books I read this year. So I picked up the rest of the series. I read The Infinite Sea and I read The Last Star, and it got so much worse. And it made me so sad because I really wanted to read the whole series. I was really invested in the characters in the first book, but it was super boring until like the last 25%, so I ended up giving this a 2.5 stars. And I cared about the characters enough that I wanted to finish it. And I don't know, I think I had all the audiobooks, and I was like, okay, I want to just finish the last book. Like, how am I just gonna read the second book and not read what happens to all these characters? So then I read The Last Star and that, my friend, was a huge mistake because I didn't like it at all. I'm not gonna spoil you. If you don't know what The Fifth Wave is about, it's about this alien apocalypse basically, and this girl trying to survive, and it's just it's just a post-apocalyptic alien story. And I didn't like how it ended. I never got along with like some of the ships, like I was never in like the teams, and then how this book ended really just like I didn't like at all. And there was a lot of tropes in here that I really didn't like, period. Like I just like didn't, it just like was kind of gross, and I was just like, why is this a plot device? So it was a no for me. I'd highly recommend The Fifth Wave. I thought that was a fantastic book. Don't read the rest of the series. Now this last book is my least favorite book I read this year. I gave it 1 star. I want to preface this by saying, and I really wish I had something more eloquent to say, but I'm not very good at speaking. This book dealt with a lot of hard topics, and I know a lot of people have heavily related to this main character and to the discussions that are made in this novel. So I want to first say that if you felt seen in this novel, that is amazing. This book can be very relevant to a lot of people, but to me it wasn't, and because I felt like the author didn't do a great way of putting you in the headspace of this main character, it just came off really bad because I could not relate to her at all. But that is not saying that this book cannot be helpful to others, and I know it hasn't. I've read very many reviews from people that related to this character and they felt really seen in this book. But anyway, my least favorite book of the year was The Song Will Save Your Life by Layla Sales. If you don't know what this book is about, it's about Elise who suffers from depression and has suicidal thoughts, and she recently has found this underground dance club that she feels really seen in. She makes a lot of friends, yada yada yada, and that's kind of just her story. I think when it came down to it, what I didn't like about this book is I didn't like how the main character acted. The main character did some really horrible things to her friends and family and treated them really badly and was kind of brushed under the rug at the end, and there was never really any part that we were kind of like, oh, like she's owning up to this. And that was what I was waiting for the whole novel, was just like a moment of clarity and a moment, not necessarily of even clarity, of just like recognizing that she's been wrong and she's done people wrong, but there was never that moment. It was just more of doing things that was like blatantly like disrespectful and rude, and at the end she didn't really have any consequences for these actions. Like obviously family's family, but like her friends were still like her close friends, even though she actively said awful things about them and didn't care for them at all. I think throughout the book it's constantly a fact that she didn't have friends, she was very unhappy, but constantly she is bringing other people down. She's being incredibly ignorant and incredibly rude to everyone. She is constantly, the girl is like, I'm not like other girls, I listen to 80s music, I like DJs, like I'm not like other girls. And that vain aspect about this is why I did not like it, and that's as simple as that. I know a lot of people have felt seen. I would still recommend this. I can't speak on the representation of the depression, but I didn't like it. I didn't like Elise, and I couldn't like the book because of it. And that be that. All right, that was probably a mess. I'm sorry about that, but it's over now and we can move on to my favorite books of the year. So thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know if you've read any of these books, your thoughts. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know. I will gladly listen. And yeah, with all that said, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a great day. Bye.